Hello.
Yes, hello. Oh my goodness, what is going on with this? I feel like a steak right now. I don't know why. I think it was the cows. I was like, I'm so hungry right now, and I think I need like a big steak. Like just, but I think that's how the cowboys and the ranchers do it. It's not like a little steak that you see at the restaurant. It's just like, boom, a big piece of meat is like thrown on there, and they're not like, hey, do you want chicken or fish or steak? They're just right into it. So with that, I want to welcome everyone for joining us here for another exciting webinar, powered, of course, by Veteran Social Summit and the Utah Veteran Business Resource Center. And I know Becky's going to go more into that, and also with some of our additional partners, collaborators, and sponsors. But I'm sorry, Becky, I just had to get that out.
You're
like,
good.
This is like, I'm just thinking about steak right now, and it's like the wrong place to be, So I'm going to drink my coffee and be quiet now. Go for it.
No, you're absolutely in the right place. I'm really excited about this webinar today, because there is a movement that's happening in the nation that is helping veterans get into farming and ranching, and finding those who have the grit, who have the interest, who really want to dive in and learn how to actually become that. There's going to be some really cool things coming down the pipeline, and we have somebody that we're going to talk with who has the expertise not only as a farmer rancher from that perspective, but also he has been huge on advocacy for our small ranchers across America, and we're going to hear a little bit about his story. So let's bring AJ on.
All right, perfect. And I was going to say, before we kick this off, one thing I was thinking about, I know we talked about this earlier, Becky, is like, is this thing. I was talking recently, I was at Oklahoma State University in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and I had a chance to talk to this PhD that's focused. He's doing his PhD in veteran entrepreneurship. It's amazing. And I was like, whimsically, I go, yeah, veterans are 45% more likely to start a business and become an entrepreneur. And then he quickly corrected me, and it's kind of scary. That number over the last decade has actually dropped between 5 and 10%. So 5 to 10% of veterans are more likely to become entrepreneur. So one of the things, and it's in our title, and AJ, I know this is in him, and in most veterans, a lot of us, especially as entrepreneurs, is grit. This thing. If you've got the grit, you're more likely, and this doesn't matter whether you're a veteran or a civilian or whatever, a human being. If you've got grit, you are more likely to succeed. I watched a TED Talk on this too, Becky.
That's absolutely correct. And I don't know why the drop is, other than, maybe it's harder to get funding these days. The funding's kind of dried up. Grants and everything have really dwindled down for businesses. And, if you're lucky enough to be one of the less than 2% of people that get venture capitalist funding, it's true bootstrapping at this point.
That is like so tough. I mean, it is a challenge. Not everyone is ready to fail forward on a second, a minute basis, an hourly basis. But this isn't about us, Becky.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're
This
good.
isn't about me trying. I'm not monopolizing this, because we need to learn about AJ, who is an Army veteran and served in the Triple Deuce Field Artillery in Salt Lake. AJ, thank you. And we appreciate that you're here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for
AJ,
having me.
yeah, it's so great to have, always good to have time with AJ and speaking about things. He came through our Strive program with a cool idea, and he wasn't sure if it was going to work. So AJ, I would love for you to talk about kind of where you started. Let's
Yeah.
work through where you've been, and Ryan and I will ask you some questions along the way, and kind of my hope is, what do you wish you would have known before you got started? And what do you think the questions are out there for some of these other veterans out there? We do have live comments that you can make, and we can interact with you on the comments here. So AJ, go ahead, and why don't you tell them about your background as far as AJ, the from the farm founder?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, glad to be here. Definitely agree with the grit that's necessary, because entrepreneurship is not easy, but also the grit kind of brings the grit brings the ability to just keep driving forward. And also there's some sense of purpose inside of that once you start digging in and keep going, because you're constantly striving to move forward, like you guys said. And so, yeah, I started selling beef for my family's ranch in 2019. I grew up in southern Utah, and my family are, 6 generations of ranchers. I'm the city slicker cousin. So, my mom married a guy from town, and he was a contractor. And so that was the life, that we followed. It's just being in town and not doing much directly involved with agriculture. Did the cattle drives and brandings with the family as often as I could. Those are my absolute favorite memories. But always was looking for a way to become a rancher. So my earlier, attempts at careers and so forth after I got home from Iraq was to try to earn enough revenue so that I could go and buy a ranch. Anyway, those things didn't work out. And I'm like, man, instead of just like beating around the bush, trying to do all these other things to get into agriculture, let me just go get into agriculture. So I called my cousin and I said, can I sell beef for your ranch? And he said, yes. So that's how I got started directly involved in ag. We were doing well, building a direct to consumer business, had customers on monthly subscription. And then all of a sudden COVID hit, and we called to get our next round of processing to feed our customers. And they told us, yeah, we can get you in a year and a half. And I was like, what? Because prior to that, we could call and they would say, how many you got? We have 5 ready for processing. Okay, see you next week. I mean, literally, it was within a week or two, you could get into a processing facility pre-COVID. And now they're telling us a year and a half. And so the fragility of our food system became very apparent to many of us in those first few months or year of COVID. Our store shelves were limited what we could buy. Toilet paper and beef were on everybody's menu, I guess. So it was wild. And so
Wow.
I started looking into the food system as a whole and what the problems were. And I recognized that, well, it's not just our problem in our town with our ranchers. This is and our processors in our state. This is a nationwide issue, which, people in agriculture have been screaming about this for decades, that consolidation and pressure, political and policy pressure, was killing our family farms and ranches. So I just started doing the research and talking about it. And during that time, I had this vision that, the way to fix the food system is to decentralize it, create a parallel food economy that prioritized our family farms and ranches and the communities that rely on them, and get people going back to the source as close to home as possible. And so we built, we set out to build from the farm, and, it was 3.5 years of R&D before I raised my first round of capital. During that 3.5 years is when I went through the Strive program. But we raised our first round of capital and started building the wireframe for our software. And, now we're this month, actually, we're 2 years post launch. So
And what you've done is incredible.
Yeah,
with,
thank you.
with your business. I always watch what you do, and I'm always like, hey, way to go. I'll text you every now and then
Yeah.
on the big stuff that you do. Talk a little bit about the pushback that you got. We can see your cowboy hats there. I'd love
Yeah.
to hear the story behind the tinfoil cowboy hat.
Yeah.
Ryan, you're muted.
Oh man, that we're not going to let AJ get away with this too. But we also got, since you're mentioning the hats, we also got to look at that. Everyone should take a close look. I know it's so small on your screen, but that picture of them holding up that beautiful
Martini.
that martini, and looking like the cowboy version of Ron Burgundy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
at some point, please weave in a little bit about that photo as well.
Well, when you're in the military, you end up friends with a lot of characters. And thanks to one of my closest friends, actually, we were in kindergarten. His name's Sean Colmanero, incredible human being, veteran. He's about to graduate. He's 43. He's about to graduate with 3 engineering degrees, and it's insane. I mean, just
amazing.
He's awesome. Anyway, so we've known each other since kindergarten. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about being in the National Guard, is that I served with my biological brother in Iraq, and then guys I grew up from, elementary all the way up. We were in combat together. And anyway, so, you always look for a chance to rib each other. And that was my recent birthday gift that was not expected at all. So in my honor of my friendship, lifelong friendship with Sean, I'm like, I'm going to throw that up on my screen so that everybody across the nation, anytime I'm doing a podcast, gets to enjoy that ridiculousness. So
I don't know. You may get some people duplicating that photo.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry. I'm not going to derail this any further, but you're talking about pushback.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Well, I mean, look, in this, if you have something that you're passionate about and you think it really makes a difference for people, is going to make a difference for people, you have to get attention. And this world, the attention span is so short. Used to be that you had 7 seconds to get somebody's attention. And actually in the Strive class, I learned from somebody that taught the marketing section, that on mobile, it's now 1.2 seconds to capture attention. And on desktop, it's like just over 2 seconds.
Yeah. What can stop the thumb from scrolling?
Yep.
We scroll over 80 miles.
That's
80
right.
Miles. Yep.
It's insane. And so, listen, I've asked God to guide me on this. This is way too big for me to do. Like, AJ should not be sitting here. AJ shouldn't be in Washington, D.C. AJ shouldn't, as a person, I'm just a guy. And so these opportunities and meetings I'm in is solely because I've asked God to guide me, and you just use me as a tool. And that tinfoil cowboy hat, believe it or not, was a stroke of inspiration, and it stopped people from scrolling at least long enough to hear some of the stuff I was having to say. And that's what helped me gain the attention that I needed to start pushing some of these things to a higher, an audience, a big enough audience that was paying attention and listening. And so the last time I wore that hat on stage was at Charlie Kirk's last turning point that he was alive for. It was in Tampa, Florida. That I was invited to be on a food panel, and wore a tinfoil cowboy hat in front of, hundreds of thousands of people online, and eventually got me connected with folks in Washington. Again, the cowboy hat was just an attention grabber, but it was the message and the things that I'd observed in the last, 6 years now, 5 years at the time, that needed attention for our food system. And so, you get pushback. I get people hating on me all the time, but it don't matter. You just got to keep going. If you know what you're up to is legitimate and of service, there's not a lot of things people can say to me to get me to derail what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I think that, go ahead, Becky.
I was just going to say, you bring up an interesting point about marketing, right? The statistic is actually we scroll 86 miles a year on our phone. So if your thumbs are tired, that's why. But that's with an average screen time of like 6.5 hours a day. So with the marketing piece of what you've done with From the Farm, it's not just from the farm that you're marketing.
No.
You're marketing. Who else are you? Tell everybody who else you're marketing on your platform.
Yeah, it really isn't about From the Farm. From the Farm. So if you go to fromthefarm.org, we've got 100 farmers and ranchers across 37 states in our nation, and growing. That's who we're promoting. We're promoting the individual families that are working to provide food for our communities. And that was sort of what I recognized during COVID was the issue was we've become so segmented and split apart from our food producers that we don't as a society know even where it's coming from. You know, I would venture to say that 99.9% of Americans just buy it from the grocery store and have no clue the source of where it even started.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all of our food. And that's as living organisms, the thing that we're most responsible for is feeding this meat suit so that we can go out and do the things we've all been called to do. And yet we have no clue about that resource, you know. And if you look at history, food is the linchpin. You know, I read a book in my research, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And he talked, you know, people were like, well, there's so many of you prisoners. Why didn't you just push and fight your captors? Like you could have overwhelmed them. And, you know, I'm recalling the book from a few years ago, but essentially he was like, if you've never been starving to death, then you can't fathom that there's nothing going through your mind other than where's my next meal coming from? Mm-hmm. As you're shoveling your friend's ashes out of the kiln, essentially for what Victor went through, you're not thinking about that. You're thinking, I'm hungry. It's just like it's repeat going through your mind. And so, you know, that's how important this is. And yet we've been totally separated from it. You know, 84 companies control 85% of the meat we consume in America. That is a fragile food system. And we saw it during COVID. And so anyway, so just kind of becoming clear on all of that, we knew we needed to do something to serve our family farms and ranches and put them back at the top of our food chain, making sure we know this is where it starts. We're down to 1.8 million farms nationwide. 86% of those are considered small. And the USDA's ranking of small means they're making $350,000 in gross revenue a year or less. 86% of the people we have left growing our food, that's where they're at. So they're all working off farm jobs, trying to maintain the lifestyle of being a producer and eking out whatever extra they can from that side. But that's such a priority for all of us that they should not be struggling. They should be getting the full retail dollar. We should be promoting our family farms and ranches, selling them out so that there's a need for more people to get back into agriculture so that we can build a stable food system again.
Yeah. And part of the issue that we found, I know it's this way in Utah. I'm assuming it's the same elsewhere. We have a lot of farmers and ranchers who were not military connected.
Yeah.
Right. But they're aging out.
Yeah.
And their kids know what it's like to be a farmer or rancher. And they're like, I'm out. I don't want to do this.
Yep.
And so you see a lot of these farms turning over into development and selling into becoming low income housing or whatever. Right. And so preserving, you know, bringing veterans into the mix, because let's talk about something that's a little bit, this might be a little triggering, but suicide rates among farmers and veterans are the highest in the nation. Like those are the two statistics that are the highest, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So if you have a veteran who needs purpose and a farmer who wants to continue the legacy of his ranch, that seems like a natural fit, right?
Yeah.
So do you want to talk a little bit about some of those efforts that you've seen?
Yeah. We're about to go through the largest transfer of land ownership in you know, recorded history for America. So that's what's happening. Your average farmer is somewhere between 55 and 65 years old. I talk to producers regularly as we, you know, in the policy work that I'm supporting, that tell me that they tell their kids, don't come back. The agencies that we're dealing with are a nightmare. It's not worth it. Go find another job. And that's terrible, right? So, because now we don't have them taking over. But to your point about the suicide rates, you know, what's interesting is, Yes, suicide rates amongst farmers and veterans are some of the highest in the nation of any industry or any group of people. And yet, when veterans get on farms, they actually heal because now they've got a purpose and they're in nature. I read this book called The 3-Day Effect, where they took veterans with PTSD and former sex workers with PTSD, and they did these 2 different studies where they mapped their brains and the activity in their brain, and then they took them out into nature on a whitewater rafting trip for 3 days, 3 or 4 days. And they took this machine with them, and I was listening to the audiobook, and it's almost like a live podcast because you can hear the water behind them. They're dictating what's happening. After 3 days, the areas of their brain that provide balance in their hormonal balance just lit up after 3 days immersed in nature. And so I think 2 things are happening there. I think the reason the farmer suicide is so high is because the connection they have to the land when they lose it, that is a complete loss of identity because that's who they are. They are a farmer. They are a rancher, right? And so when they lose that, that's where the suicide, or they're about to lose it. I think that's where the suicide comes in. But for veterans, when they get out into nature, their job all day, every day is moving their cows or moving their chickens or planting their garden. They're now in nature and they find balance because of being out there in that natural environment. And so it's just interesting to see that what is the connection we have to nature and how crucial that can be to all of us. And ultimately for veterans, it comes down to a purpose, being outside and having a purpose. And I've met many who are vets that are now farmers, and they couldn't be happier. That helped them find the balance they're looking for.
Yeah, it's amazing. Ryan, did you have any questions that you want to ask?
Well, it's kind of circling back to something we were talking about earlier, and just kind of curious what your thoughts are on with all the criticism that you were talking about earlier. And this is a very competitive landscape that you're in because you're competing with bigger, entities, not these. So the families are taking on the big business. And so with that being said, what values or pillars does from the farm and even yourself utilize to put the blinders on and to push through the objective?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've been around now for what I say, 2 years now. March 24 was when we launched, and our vision is that we make sure the producer gets the full retail dollar. And so we're building an ecosystem that, frankly, from the old standard of doing business doesn't make sense because we're not trying to get ours first, right? We don't take a commission off the sell of food, which is the easy button. Customer comes in, they buy on the platform from the producer. We take a piece of that. That's the easy button. But now we are duplicating the system that currently exists, which is starting to extract from them what they need to be viable. So we built this ecosystem where the producers can either sell on our platform completely for free, or they can pay for higher services, software services that, if they have a bigger business they might need. We just wanted to give everybody an on-ramp to be able to start selling e-commerce and connect with their local community, and not take any of the money they need for that food dollar. In the beef world, for example, farmers and ranchers gets 9 to 14 cents on the dollar in that system, in our current system. They're only getting 9 to 14 cents on the food dollar. The rest is going to all the middlemen processing, marketing, logistics for transportation, the shelf space on the grocery store, and the margins the grocery store needs. So they're down here. Everybody else is getting the rest. In our current system, all of those are necessary. In our current system, you've got to have somebody process it. That's always going to be necessary. But then somebody's got to market it to be able to sell it. Then somebody's got to transport it to where it's being, all of those have to happen in the current system. But we can change that. E-commerce and online business has allowed us to pivot away from that, which is why many companies are making millions and millions of dollars online selling food. But those are white label companies. So they're aggregating maybe a little better price for the rancher, but they're still selling it under one label that they're not the ones producing the food. So we're trying to change all of that and say, no, 100% of your food dollar should be to the farmers and ranchers if we're going to build a new system. And so that's what we do. Now, our challenge is we have to find ways to bring revenue in from the ecosystem as a whole. We call ourselves a hub and spoke, model. The hub is where the consumer and the producer meet. Our goal is to find all of those spokes that connect to that hub where we can earn a slight commission, but we're also aggregating and bringing down prices. So for example, 100 producers, we go to a packaging manufacturer, corrugated boxes and insulation and gel packs. That's all required to ship food from farm to plate. Well, we can go and aggregate those prices and bring those prices down for our producers because the number of producers we're serving and have a small commission. If we repeat that with the shipping costs, we aggregate, bring shipping price down so we're competitive, but there's still enough margin for us to get a little sliver there. So our from the farms model, the only way it'll be successful is if we are of service to our farmers and ranchers first. And that, when funding is hard, is very hard. We're 2 years in now, and we need to raise our next round of capital. And that's the path we're on, is trying to figure out who has the understanding of our food system in its current state that can invest in what we're doing for a long-term return. They're not looking for an immediate ROI. We're looking for somebody, because we're not going to take private equity or venture capital that's just going to come in and change it to work for them and not for our farmers and ranchers. So we're super selective on who will even entertain for that. And that's hard when the world is already hard enough to find capital. But I'd rather see this thing fail when trying to do it right than to bring in the wrong partners and watch them take it over and ruin what is designed to actually put us on the right path for our food system.
Yeah. Joe has that question there. Are you helping to facilitate doing direct to consumer?
Yep, exactly. So our long-term goal, and we hope to get there sooner than later, is if From the Farm becomes known at the same level as Airbnb, this is kind of our vision. If 1 million or 2 million consumers are like, I want to buy direct, but I want to make sure I can trust them, and then they learn of From the Farm, because we verify every producer on our platform that they are a family operation, and then you can go direct. Our goal is to remove the marketing off the backs of our farmers and ranchers, right? If you have a short-term rental, you're not marketing that. You just have it clean and ready for, somebody to rent. Airbnb has done the marketing for you. If we can repeat that here, the biggest chunk of the food dollar goes into marketing. So if we can do that collectively, now that chunk of that food dollar stays with the producer. So yeah, to Joe's question, that is what our goal is. There are producers now, they're getting some sales as, our organic traffic comes From the Farm. But ultimately we need to get to a point where we can, sponsor Joe Rogan and sponsor Tucker Carlson and sponsor, any of these other major podcast platforms that have proven to drive that number of consumers to different products. And then our producers won't have to deal with it anymore.
Yeah. So you did do some crowdfunding to get started.
We did.
Yep.
Yeah.
You want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, we did our first round. We did my first raise to build our MVP, and that came from my co-founder early on. Her name's Brooke Entz. She's incredible. So she brought the capital we needed to build our MVP, our minimum viable product, just something that we could get started and start testing the market. And then shortly after launching, my mentor, who'd guided me since day one, I put a pitch together. He brought some folks in a room, and they got us our next round of capital, invested our next round to keep scaling. Then we went to crowdfunding, and we did $300 and something thousand in crowdfunding from 300 and something investors. And it was great. We did that on a rev share model instead of an equity play. And so they're earning, right now it's pennies what they're getting in return, but over time, if we can get them paid back in 5 years, they'll double their investment, which is a good ROI. So these people are people that saw what we were doing and took the risk with us to help, keep going. And so we did do that crowdfunding round. We launched that. There was a lot going on. North Carolina flooded, the elections were going on. Like, it was a terrible time to launch a crowdfunding because everybody's hearts were into helping these communities that were devastated. But we were still happy with what we got there.
Yeah, well done. I mean, good job. Congrats on all of that.
Yeah, thanks.
I want to shift a little bit because you have this story doesn't stop at what you're doing with From the Farm.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about feeling like you've stepped into a calling and you're answering that call. Do you want to share a little bit about where that's taken you and some of the stories behind that? Because part of this is, yes, we are focusing, we have a, you and I and Juan Whiting from Hinterland Institute are working on something together that we hope to have a big announcement here soon. But one of the things that I've seen both of you do is become these powerhouses and sages, so to speak,
Yeah.
to people that are trying to figure out how to support the industry, but also calling attention to what's needed. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. It did not come as any surprise when I started digging into our food system that we are here because of our politicians. Decades of bad decisions bought and paid for by lobbyists for big corporations to influence policy and the way food was grown, processed, and distributed. It's affected at every level. And almost since the day that these agencies were enacted, you can see a decline in our farms, family farms and ranches, clear back to 1935 when they implemented the Taylor Grazing Act in the West, which regulated how many cows were allowed to be on public land, right? That's that 1935. And you can see on a graph that we just started losing them. Every time the government made a decision to help, we lost more farms and ranches, and it was very clear. And so that's what I started talking about mostly on social media, was the policies that put us where we're at. And now we're a very vulnerable nation because our food system. So highlighting that and really starting to dig in and understand what those policies were, like the Taylor Grazing Act, they call it NEPA. It's an environmental policy that basically farmers and ranchers have to have done before they can put a watering tank in or put a fence up or do anything to manage their ranches better. They have to go through all of these hoops, and then they don't get done because you've got people that are in these positions that aren't there to serve our nation's food system, but more of an agenda. And in my experience, it's an environmental agenda is what's causing us the most problems. And people are totally unaware of that. Environmental non-government organizations that want to take cows off the land because, they want to rewild it. That is happening. Inarguable. We've got the evidence. We've got, I was in, I'll bring this picture up real quick. I was just in DC. Oh, it won't allow me. If you'll bring the says Shad prayer. I was in DC 2 weeks ago. This photo is at the USDA's headquarters. This is when they announced the Lawfare Group. It's a Farmer Freedom Framework. And so in that room, you've got Shad is standing there opening this meeting with a prayer. So let me just say, as somebody who's a follower of Christ, to be in Washington with, the Secretary of Agriculture is there in the red. She asked Shad to bring a blessing over the meeting. But all on that side where Shad is, on the right-hand side of your screen, are all farmers and ranchers from tip of the table to tip of the table on the right-hand side, farmers and ranchers across the nation that have been persecuted by state or federal agencies. And they're each of them dealing with their own issue that somebody's trying to take their farm or ranch away. And the secretary came in last year, was the first time, this secretary's come in and started going to work. If you'll, kind of go through some of those other photos, that's kind of where it started. So this is a group of ranchers from 4 different Western states that went out to DC. The very first time we were invited out to have a meeting with the secretary and talk to her about what they have been dealing with. I always tell people, I'm not the expert. The farmers and ranchers are. I'll get you over the bullseye, and these folks are going to help you hit the bullseye. because they're the ones that have been dealing with it for generations. Just mom and dad passed on the same challenges. And so this was at the White House. She had us over for a private breakfast that morning before we went to her office. And it was just us. Like, we didn't know when we got there if she was going to be flanked by, all these bureaucrats, what we could or couldn't say, personally. And so we go to this, was in the Navy mess hall, which is in the White House. And she told us, I want to meet with you guys alone so you can tell me what's actually happening, what's really going on that I don't know about. And that was kind of the first sign for all of us that we've got somebody now leading our USDA that we've never had before. Legitimately, she's the best Secretary of Agriculture we've ever had, because she's listening to the independent ranchers and farmers, not the lobbyists or trade organizations. And so that's kind of the work we got into. And really why I got into it is I'm like, what good is it to have an ecosystem to connect consumers and producers if they're not allowed to even sell to you because of policies that prevent that, right? I live in Wyoming, Cody, Wyoming. We have one of the best food sovereignty rules in the entire country. We basically in Wyoming have this rule that I'm a consenting adult. If Becky's making sourdough bread out of her kitchen, I can buy it from her because I'm a consenting adult. I can choose, right? And so pretty much anything produced for food in Wyoming is allowed to be sold to your neighbors here. And I think it should be that way across the nation. We're still a long way off from that, depending on what state you're in and who's running it. But that's really what we're working towards, is food sovereignty. So, and I'll just say this real quick too. I heard somebody say it once. The difference between food sovereignty and food security is having something to put in your stomach and not starve to death. It could be lab grown meat. That would be considered food security. But food sovereignty is my right to choose what I want to eat, and I have access to it. Not being forced something that's only available because it's all that's left, but the right to choose what I want to eat. Meat, raw dairy, locally produced breads, whatever that looks like, I should get to choose as an adult. You're on mute, Becky.
Sorry, I was asking, like, did you ever imagine you'd have that voice? Did you ever imagine you'd have that platform?
No. And yeah, I definitely didn't. And I'm extremely humbled and also respectful of why I do. It's not me. There's a lot of responsibility with that because I can open my mouth and say something stupid, and I've done that before. You learn, be very cautious of what you're backing or what you're saying unless you've done the research yourself. Because there's so many. I mean, I tell people, look, there are plenty of hills to die on. Pick one and stand shoulder to shoulder with somebody because there's a lot going on, And so I get all kinds of people reaching out, like, help me with this, help me with this. But I don't have the time to dive into the details of all those because our food system itself is so challenging. And sometimes I'll be like, yeah, cool, you must be doing the research, and I'll share it and back it. And then all of a sudden I get hammered with like the things I didn't know because I wasn't studying it. So you have to be very responsible for your reach, and then the other side too, just from the algorithm side, like that's what I've built with my social is currency in a sense. There's value to that. And if you don't understand, and this is more like, I guess, coaching or business tips for people listening, your algorithm knows and helps based on your message. So if I'm over here talking about food system and buying from your local farmer and rancher, and then all of a sudden I talk about election laws, I will lose my algorithm because it doesn't know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. So I have to, even things that I'm really passionate about and want to, and really wish I could throw my voice behind. I know that if I do that, I will ruin my algorithm and not be able to keep driving this particular mission forward. And so you just should know that and make the decision for yourself, what you do, weigh in on what you don't.
Yeah. And being careful and mindful about what you say. You
Yep.
know, just because you're angry about something does not mean it belongs on your social media channel.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know, yeah, that's a hard thing for some people. But it looks like Joe and Kennedy have some knowledge about farming and ranching as well. And so you mentioned something, but I have two questions. Ryan, I'm taking all the questions. I'm sorry.
No, you go for it.
Okay.
If you want me to wrap away, I can do that for sure.
I have two questions, and then I if you have other questions to ask, like I would love you to ask yours, because I know you. I'm going off of what you just said, AJ, but there's one question that I haven't asked, and that's something that a lot of people don't consider.
Okay.
The ag adjacent benefits for businesses. It's not just about getting the seeds in the ground or getting the animals fed. It's what's adjacent to that in this ecosystem. So there's manufacturing, there's you have a sheep farm who's going to spin the wool, right? There's manufacturing that could come from bringing these farms and ranches back to everything here in America. But I would love for you to share how cyber has played a role for you, because technology has a big play in agriculture right now, and it's increasingly becoming part of the process in agriculture.
Yeah. We wouldn't be able to consider an alternative marketplace if technology didn't evolve like it has. In fact, when this vision first came to me, I was driving down the road and there was empty store, the news was talking about empty store shelves, and I see fat cows in the field. And I'm like, well, everybody in the city's freaking out because there's no beef, but my cousin's got a bunch of beef in the field that are ready to go, and they just don't know how to find each other anymore. We've been segmented. And so I'm like, somebody should build the Airbnb of local food. And that was really kind of what I thought. And I'm like, I'm not doing that. I don't know. I'm trying to get on a ranch. That's what I want to do. I want to sell beef and ranch. Like, I don't want to get into technology.
Yeah.
And so for 3 weeks, I denied it, pushed it away, couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the face of a man in Iraq when we took care packages to him. And I was seeing me as this man watching other men feed my family. And I'm like, okay. And I hadn't thought about that guy for, 20 years since I was there. And now all of a sudden it's just right in my face at night when I'm trying to fall asleep. And so finally I'm like, okay, God, clearly you're not going to let me just let this go. So who do I got to talk to? So I reached out, found a mentor in Southern Utah. His name's Isaac Barlow. He's the founder of Tech Ridge, was a technology developer at the time, a company called Busy. And I told him the idea, and he goes, look, the last thing I would ever get into as a startup again is software, because only 1 in 2,000 make it. So if you're going to do this, you better know for sure that there's a need and that you have the path to it. So you do the research. And so, but it all came down to technology. So I did. I spent 3.5 years starting different direct-to-consumer businesses. I even found myself, what moved us to Cody, Wyoming was in the pursuit of understanding what I was trying to build more. I ended up running a USDA slaughterhouse in Cody. And if you would have told me that in April of 2020, I would have quit then. I would have not had the confidence that, God was guiding me. I'd be like, oh, you're trying to bury me. So anyway, what I learned though, when I went back to Isaac, I presented the wireframe, and I'd hired this kid from Pakistan on Fiverr, which is a crowdfunding sort of service website. Hired this kid from Pakistan, and he knocked it out in a month with a perfect, what they call a wireframe to show investors or people what this would look like if we built it. And I remember reaching back out to Isaac, and I'm like, hey, the wireframe's ready. And he's like, what? It's ready? And I'm like, yeah. So we get on the call and I go through it, and he goes, man, in 2011, when I built the wireframe for Busy, it cost me $25,000 and 12 months of development just to build the wireframe, because technology then hadn't advanced to where you could like drag and drop on a software called Figma and lay out what it was going to look like. They literally had to code every line of a wireframe just to show what it might look like. And we knocked this out right away. So I think the advancement of technology will allow us to rapidly advance what we're offering without the capital resources necessary that, early on others had to deal with because of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I think we have Daniel on for a question really quick.
Yeah.
Thanks for breaking the trend of my questioning.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's go, Daniel.
All right. So, as a veteran and as a fellow Christian, how can we go over and support you and support the farmers? Because we are typically the shoppers. I mean, I might have a commissary job in a few short weeks. So, I understand some of the grocery world and everything else, but how do we bring that support back? But with also helping to empower people's dreams, because you're right, a lot of people, like you said in your talk, wanted to leave the family farm world, but we're losing a lot of our health, wellness benefits, and also opportunities. So how can we go over and help you in that balance?
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that question. Go to the website and buy from those farmers. There's nothing that makes me more happy than to log in the morning and see who has supported our family farms and ranches. Like, it really just, like I said, we still have a long way to go before From the Farm benefits from that financially, but farmers and producers have been taken advantage of for so long that my biggest fear is letting them down after I commit to serving them, right? Because I don't want to do that. That's happened too many times before. So even just getting them in the door now, it comes with this feeling of like, sure, we've heard it all before, but we'll give it a shot. So when a customer goes on there and buys from them, that's the greatest feeling for me. That is real support. Consumers don't realize that our food dollars is what shifts markets, right? Like 2 weeks ago or last week, the executive order to protect glyphosate was this massive blow up in the food on the internet. If you're in the food world at all, even if you're not, it was so talked about. You probably saw it on your feed. Well, the reality is the producers using that are using it because they're dependent, because that's where the system took them. If we want them to shift to regenerative agriculture, which I've spent a lot of time and energy researching and studying that. I've even got a desert regeneration project that I'm part of in Utah, in the Escalante Desert. So I'm all in on that. But the reality is this: if the consumer demand isn't there for those products when they make the shift, they can't. They won't be able to afford the transition. They won't have the market signal that says, hey, this is what I want. So when you go direct and support them directly, you're putting that retail dollar in their pocket, which is the absolute best thing they could ever have. And depending on what you're buying, you start helping them understand, like, oh, if I do more of this, if I'm not using glyphosate on my, crops, or if I'm not feeding my livestock hormones and, growth hormones and whatever else, then the producer will shift their practices because that's what you, the consumer, wants. So yeah, I'm really appreciative of that question, Daniel. That would be very helpful.
Yeah.
So I guess a sub question with that is that for twofold, for the veterans and for the patriots going supporting the veterans that are active duty, the delivery wise, how are they going to receive it? And secondarily, what are the price comparisons in that particular guard? I'll share an example that hit me yesterday. One of my friends I've had for like a year and a half, we produce books and other things. He's like, there's no way I could afford X amount on a pre-buy book and everything else. So he was so psychologically bound, even though I've known him for 3 years, he wouldn't purchase the book. So I think a lot of people have that consumer hesitancy if you're going to go purchase something. So is it competitive, and can it ship to our troops if our troops are ordering it?
Yeah, great question. If they are, if the troops are in the U.S., they can still get their deliveries. If they're out of the country, that's obviously not going to be possible at this moment. But to your point of the affordability and the comparison, there's a lot of consumer education that has to be done here, because the reality is, probably in our house, and it took us a long time to get here, we're about 80% of our food is sourced from people we know, whether it's online or locally where we live. All of our food, as much of our food as possible, comes from people we know. Now, I'm in Cody, Wyoming. Vegetables are hard to find in the winter in Cody, Wyoming. So that's where we kind of have to go back into the commodity system. But here's what we learned. Our costs actually were not much higher at all. I mean, they were so meaningless in terms of, in comparison to the nutritional value that we got out of our food, that it was totally worth it to do it that way. But people don't prep anymore. They don't cook. And the reason it's not much more money is because when my wife cooks dinner, we always have leftovers.
Mm-hmm.
If you grew up in a household that your mom or your dad cooked, you probably had leftovers. Now, as kids, you probably hated leftovers. But the reality is your family got 2 meals out of the purchase of one. And because of the high quality nutritional value, your body's the satiation that your body needs gets triggered sooner. So you're not eating as much as you would if they were high processed foods. And so it's actually not as bad as people think. Now, what I recommend is following what we call behavioral change science. I used to teach this when I owned a CrossFit gym and a sports entertainment company, getting people's psychology to transition. So what I tell people is, just like I did helping people, get rid of bad habits in the gym, it's the same thing that applies with your food. Pick one item in your refrigerator, freezer, or pantry, just one, and find a local source to replace that with. And do that until it becomes habit. I'm buying my beef from this producer. Now this is so easy that if that producer isn't available, I can make the change and I'm not freaking out because I've now learned how to do that. Just start there until that becomes a habit. And then when it does, pick the next item and then the next item. And then eventually you'll have replaced everything in your pantry and your refrigerator with locally sourced food, and you'll learn what the economics are, and it'll make a huge difference for your family.
All right. I think we have one more question from Christy. If you're there and ready to shoot. You're on mute.
Hi, Christy.
Oh, maybe not. Internet is not cooperating with her.
Yeah, she froze.
Ah,
There she is.
there she is. What's your question, Christy? You're on. We can't hear you.
She's not on mute, but we can't hear her. Dang it.
Oh no. You need a voice.
We still don't got you. Dang it.
Do you want to drop your question in the chat, in the comments? We can see the comments when you make them.
We still can't hear you, unfortunately. It's probably connecting to your earbuds if you have them. Well, definitely drop your question in the comments, Christy, and we'll try to answer them. Until then, though, let's pivot a little bit. We have about 8 minutes remaining. I want to talk a little bit about your veteran experience and how that it has actually overall affected your entrepreneurship journey. So if we could talk a little bit about that. So maybe just start with your Army story.
Yeah, my time was, like I was saying earlier, it's all National Guard time. So grateful for that experience, to have both a civilian life and be involved in, military service and then eventually combat. Our deployment was, we deployed twice. First time we ended up not going overseas. We thought we were going, but when we did finally go overseas, we were deployed for 1.5 years, 6 months stateside, and a year, on the other side of the ocean. But, the challenge in National Guard is that everybody in our unit had jobs and careers. And so you can't put those on hold for 1.5 years and come back to the same business. Like many of the guys had construction companies and those just were done. I think some of their wives tried to run them as long as they could, but that was short-lived. So, but really the biggest lesson learned, or the biggest impact, is the fact that there are very few places left in our society for rites of passage, especially for young men. I heard this from somebody a long time ago that that for men, the rite of passage has to be is very distinct. You have to be tested, right? Military service, going on a mission, joining the Peace Corps, somewhere where you have to leave the nest. Mom and dad's not there to rescue you anymore. And you got to figure out how to be your own person. And hopefully the wisdom and the knowledge and the skills that your father or whoever raised you with can then be tested and expressed in those environments. So just the fact that I left home, even basic training alone in the right mindset, will help a young person evolve, right? It really builds a lot of personal character if you approach it for that reason. But as we started out this whole conversation, resilience. When you're driving, I remember driving away on the bus, leaving our family to leave and start counting the days. You know, anybody in the military knows you don't do that. When you start saying like 18 months and you start counting the days, you're not going to make it. You know, same thing they tell you when you go into basic training or your specialty training, left foot, right foot. If you're thinking about, if you just start a 12-mile road march and you're thinking about 12 miles, you're going to fall out. But if you're thinking, oh, let me get to that tree. Okay, now I'm going to get to that next tree. Okay, now I'm going to get to the next tree, right? That's where the grit builds, because you're suffering from tree to tree, but you're digging down deep in your soul, in your physical body to say, I can get to the next tree. And then you get there and you're like, okay, now I'm just going to the next tree. That's where grit and resilience comes from. It builds that in you. And so when I'm driving away and I'm thinking, holy crap, I'm going to be away from my wife and child for 365 days. That's overwhelming. So then it's like, okay, some days I just got to get through this hour. And then other days it's like a week would go by. And then, it's kind of this ebb and flow. But I think that's where the real grit and resilience came from, is just having to learn how to do that and push through. And then when you get into business, it is going to be the same thing. Like, I've had days where that day I felt like everything was over and I just needed to get to tomorrow. And then all of a sudden tomorrow there was a reprieve and it's like, okay, I've got a little bit more wind in my sails. I can get through the week. And that is what entrepreneurship will be like. And when you associate that back to what you go through in the military, it starts connecting dots.
Perfect. And Chrissy's question was, what led you to read Man's Search for Meaning? She comments that it's a very transformational read.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in my previous career in self-development and personal development and coaching people. And so I think a friend or a mentor probably suggested the book just to understand the human psychology side. That's been a lot of what my reading has been. Like this book here was one that I think everybody should read. It's called Red Famine. Red Famine was the Holodomor in Soviet Russia. 7 million people starved to death from famine. And so understanding the psychology behind these different things is what's really helped.
Beautiful. And we're coming to the top of the hour. So AJ, any final thoughts? And of course, I want to say thank you. I know Becky might have something to also say as well. So final thoughts.
Yeah, final thoughts. Well, this is what I would say. If you are a veteran and you're looking to get into agriculture, now's the time. There will be resources and support coming from Washington. Like I said, this secretary definitely gets what's going on. She texted me once early on, how do we get more farmers into farming? Where are they coming from? And I said, kids that were raised there, they already have the knowledge and the grit. Veterans, because they have the grit and the desire, they're looking for that next mission, and this will serve them. This will help the veteran suicide rate come down while becoming food producers. And the third one was homesteaders. And so my kind of closing remark would be, now's the time. We need you. If you're looking to grow food, grow food. Look into leasing land, not owning land. There's plenty of people out there that have chunks of property that are not doing anything with it, and you can lease that. So I've heard people find a sweetheart deal where it's an old couple. They're like $1 for an acre, and it's, for a year or whatever. That's a huge deal. It gets you a chance to build your business. So get into agriculture if you're thinking about it. Start growing food and selling it to your community. We have to have that. This is a need. This is not a want. And then the other side of it is if you're not going to grow food, find your local farmers and ranchers and buy directly from them. This is entirely in the hands of the consumers. If our country experiences famine, it will be as much the responsibility of the consumer not being aware of where their food comes from as it will be the policies that got us here.
Yeah. I would just
Beautiful.
add one thing to what you just said, AJ. Buy directly from the farmer or rancher and then tell other people how to buy from them as well.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, that's
Beautiful.
amazing. Like, I was really excited about this conversation because we've been working on a lot of different things, and it's been fun to see you and Juan come through the Strive program and kind of build off of what you've used to build what you have and what now other people have access to. So thank you for what you're doing. I know this is not the only program out there, but this is something that spreads across the nation. So if you know of a farmer rancher that you can't find from the farm, or one of a mechanism like that, get them on there, encourage them to do that so that the local people can tell them your tagline, AJ.
Shake the hand that feeds you.
Shake the hand that feeds you. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you,
AJ.
That's all I'm going to say. You can close it out.
Oh, don't do that to us. So Becky and I are headed actually to Dallas here. I'm headed there tomorrow, and we're headed to the Institute for Veterans, Military, Family and Families Veteran Edge Conference.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are there, definitely let's all have a conversation and connect there if we're not already connected. And very excited about that. It's an epic value adding event. And of course, with that, I have to tell you that Veteran Social Summit is returning virtually on 9 and 10 September. So we're just a few short months, like 6 months away in about a week from the event. And I am about to open up the speaker call. Actually, I've reached out to a few people already that are really dynamic individuals going to be joining us on stage. And aside from that, Becky, is there anything else that we can, share?
Well, if with your permission, sir, I'd like to share yours and my LinkedIn pages for anybody that wants to connect with us.
For sure.
I think that would be good. So I'm going to
Do we have anybody that we need to? I mean, I'm thankful for you and for the Utah Veteran Business Resource Center, but is there anyone else that we need to?
Yeah, sorry.
Aside from AJ being so awesome.
Yeah, no, we stand on shoulders that have built what we have today. I am the third director of this Veteran Business Resource Center. We're funded through our Department of Veterans and Military Affairs for the state of Utah. And we're housed here at Salt Lake Community College, where we have a lot of support in our state to help us with our veteran entrepreneurs in the states. If you are curious about getting into business, or you would like to talk with somebody, get connected with one of us. We can get you to your local VBOC, Veteran Business Outreach Centers. There's 33 of those across the nation. And there are thousands of small business development centers as well. We work really closely with our local VBOC out of Big Sky, Montana, and we're really excited to see a lot of this support come to our entrepreneurs. For those folks that are taking those steps forward, you just need to know there's a wealth of knowledge out there for you, and there's a lot of people who are willing to help. Institute for Veterans and Military Families, they have a lot of programs as well, not just in the entrepreneurship space. There's 5 different categories that they cover, including public policy. You can learn about that. They have Onward to Opportunity to help you get certified with a certificate that you need in a lot of cyberspace. We stand on a lot of shoulders that we're incredibly grateful for. And I'm so thankful for you, Ryan, for joining me on these crazy journeys and these ideas of let's just have a conversation. So thank you for that.
It's beautiful. And with that, we all of us, the veteran community, we need to unite. We need to grow, amplify, and elevate all of us so that we could take this 5 to 10%, more likely up to 99%. Entrepreneurship's not for everybody. But on that, have a good day, everyone. Be blessed out there and be safe, and take care.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye, Becky. Bye, AJ.